everybody, welcome back to The Hobby Musician. You're joining us on the first episode of our brand new 4th season. And we thought, what better way to kick things off than with a 2-episode mini-series where we take a deep dive look at some of the aspects of digital modelers. If you've been following guitar gear for the past 5 or 10 years, you already know that there are tons of companies out there offering products that can produce digital tones that are super authentic sounding. But one of the added benefits of doing it all digitally is that it offers the player flexibility in how they create and route those tones. Now, if you're just getting into the market, or if you already have one of these units, companies like Line 6, and they're not a sponsor, offer a wide range of products, starting with the smallest of their family, with this HX Stomp, going all the way up to the full-fledged floorboard. But if you have one of these units, or you're trying to consider, maybe I could accomplish what I want with something small to start with, the specific topic we're going to take a look at today is how you can create a wet-dry rig with something as simple and stripped down as the smallest modeler unit in that series. Now, if you haven't heard that term before, wet-dry rigs simply refer to creating a tone through 2 separate independent tones, a wet tone and a dry tone. And at the end of those chains, a common way to accomplish this is to pan one hard left and one hard right, so that when they come out of the speakers, they don't interfere with each other, but when they reach the listener, they're combining and kind of creating a single experience. Some pretty common applications for this is typically if you're wanting to create a super expansive, epic, just huge tone. All of those descriptive words are kind of commonly associated with wet-dry rigs. This expansive tone typically needs a lot of effects. You need big reverbs, big delays, big modulations. But the downside is if you use a single amplifier and a single chain, the more effect you bring into a signal, the less of the amp, the less of the clarity and articulation of the notes will come through. That's just the nature of how effects work. On the other hand, if you want a really clear, pristine, articulated sound, you're going to want to have an amplifier with almost no effects. You're going to want something with crispy, driven tones, and you're going to hear every single picked note, but then you're not going to have the luscious reverb. So people have discovered if you separate your guitar tone and run it through 2 different amplifiers with different signal paths, you can then put them out the speakers at the end, and they will combine in the listener's ear, which will give them the experience of hearing crisp, articulated notes with all of that echoey reverb goodness. So we're going to do that today with the HX Stomp. And one of the methods that we're going to do, I'm going to show you a true 2 amplifier patch that will run your signals separately through both, and you'll hear how they both interact at the end and how they're separate left and right. So to get there, I'm going to switch up the camera, show you the screen, and we'll pull up HX Edit. We'll get started here in a second. Okay, everybody, we're all set up here, and real quickly, just to let you know what I've got going on, I am holding, and you can kind of see it here, I'm holding my Les Paul copy guitar, because as we said, one of the main reasons for doing a wet-dry rig is to try to create these like epically huge tones, so I wanted to get something with some humbuckers in it. Also on the screen, you can see here that we've got HX Edit pulled up, and I want to do this in real time. I want to show you from a literally blank preset how you can quickly get up and running. So we're going to create a tone that's like passable, but it's absolutely something that when you set this up for yourself, you're going to go in and you're going to want to spend a lot more time tweaking than we actually do right here. The last thing I'll say before we start, you can see I've got my monitors in because this whole patch lives and dies on the aspect of being stereo, completely split left to right. So if you don't already have your headphones on or good speakers where you can hear the very hard panned right and hard panned left, you're going to want to make sure you get that. So you can really get the full effect of this tone. So to begin with, as we said, this is a true. We are going to put up, it's going to be basic, and you're going to see we're going to have some limitations, but it is a true 2 amplifier wet dry rig using the HX Stomp. So right here on this first block, I've got my mouse hovered over it. I'm going to come down to the amp and cab menu. And again, this is a great way to save spaces. We have a limit of 8 blocks in the current software for the HX Stomp. So I'm going to go down, I'm going to pull 2 quick amps. The first amp I'm going to pull is this US Princess. It's a really nice, it's a great recreation of the Fender Princeton amp. A lot of people are coaxing some great tones out of this. Couple things I'm going to do. You can see the default settings that come up here. I'm going to click onto the cab tab, and I just want to make a couple changes. I want to change the microphone to a 160 ribbon. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring the distance of the microphone up to about 5 inches. I'm not going to do too much with the low and the high cut, but I'm just going to bring that microphone back a little bit so that it's not as present. And you're going to see, I don't want it as punchy and present, because this is the amp that we're going to really just saturate with effects. So I kind of want to just diffuse that amp sound, and kind of picking this microphone and distance combination is going to help me do that. Now back up in my signal chain, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click, hold, and drag it down to the second path. You'll see that that creates a split here. So when the guitar itself, the signal comes in, it's going to be split down 2 paths. We can click on this. This is a mixer. Right now, we don't really care. We can just leave it the way it is. It's going to split the signal and send it down both paths. Now, going up to the top path, as we said, this is a 2 amplifier, a truly 2 amplifier rig, so I need a second amp. I'm going to go back to my amp and cab menu, and I'm just going to pick, again, one of the biggest tweakable features of this kind of approach is which amps you pick. I'm just going to go down here and pick, I think, where did I find it? There's their version of an AC30, a Vox AC30, the Essex A30. I'm going to pick that one, and on the, oops, my guitar's on. On the cab tab, again, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do a similar approach, but I'm going to pick different combinations. I want to pick the 57 dynamic. This isn't necessarily a common microphone that people pick for making these like luscious tones and everything, but the whole point of this is I want something very punchy, very bright for my dry path, which this AC30 is going to be, and I want something very diffuse and ambient for my wet path. So I'm picking the 57 microphone for that, and I'm actually going to bring the distance closer, down to something like 2.5 inches. So almost the exact opposite of what we did for the other amplifier. Now going back to this amp setting, one of the other things that I want to punch up is I want to punch up the drive a little bit. Maybe we'll bring that drive up to 6. I'm also going to bring the bass down just a bit, and push the treble up just a bit. So you can see the settings here. Bass is about 3.6 and the treble is about 6.2. Now, again, we can come back and tweak this later, but just already I know that I want this to be the amplifier that's a little more punchy. Now, we don't have, I'm not doing sound samples yet because I want to finish building out this patch. And then we'll see when we set everything to left and right, we'll be able to kind of solo them in and you'll see how it sounds. The last couple of things, we're going to only add 2 more things. We're going to add at the very, I could pick any of the blocks down here, but at the end of the wet chain, I'm going to add a reverb. And I'm going to go specifically into the legacy menu. You can see down here, and I'm going to pick the cave reverb. I'm going to bring the decay up just to almost unusable levels, like in a normal situation, just up to like 6.4, we'll say. The low cut, I'm actually going to bring down. I want a little more. The low cut is where it cuts off the frequency. So I want it to cut off the frequencies a little lower. I want to get, it's the opposite. I want to get more of the frequency, so I got to bring this down so some of those frequencies come in, and I'm going to take this mix up to like 70, 69 or 70%. Again, this is way over the top if you were just using a single amplifier and a single chain for this. right in front of that reverb, I'm going to put a delay. And at this point, I want to make a note. If you're paying attention to the screen, you would have noticed that I'm starting, when I clicked onto these other blocks, some of my menu options are now grayed out. And when I put my mouse over them, they don't even highlight. This is what we were talking about when we kind of referred to some of the limitations. Devices like the HX Stomp, it truly is the most stripped down version of the modeler in this family of products from the company. So we will have to be economical in how we choose effects. So this, I made sure that we had enough processing power left. We get one delay, and I'm going to specifically I'm going to go into the legacy again just for simplicity here. I'm going to get the digital with mod. So it's almost cheating a little bit because I get a little delay and I get a little modulation together in one pedal. So it's, again, we're being economical here. I'm going to take the time, I'm going to leave the time. You can tweak this if you like a time-based or a note-based, depending on your thing, you can switch that around. But I want the feedback. I want the feedback way up high. So we'll bring that up to like 62%. I want the depth. Now the modulation, this is the depth of the modulation. I want it really high, 85%-ish, because we want to get the repeats, the echoes of the delay, and we want them to be dripping with modulation. And I'm going to bring the mix. I want to hear this effect on this path way up again. I want it up in the 70, 73%. The last thing that we need to do will depend. For this video, I'm going to do it a certain way, but I just want to mention, if you're doing this on stage or if you're doing this for a recording setup, you may have to do slightly different things here or there, because the outputs will depend on what physically you have connected to the unit. Are you sending it to front of house, or are you sending it digitally through a USB cable? But the last part of this is we've got to turn everything to the left and everything to the right. Okay, so I'm clicking on this merge point. You can see that the bottom path comes back up and merges to the main path, and technically it's going through a single output. Well, if it's a single output, I want to tell it to take the top line and send it hard one way, and the bottom line and send it. So that's why clicking on this merge point will bring up the menu. There's an A and a B. The level is just the volume. You can make it louder or make it softer, and that is going to play a part when we go to dialing this in. But the panning is what we're going to do here. A is the top, so I want to take that left. The top is the dry. It's just one amplifier. It's kind of crunchy, so I want to put that all the way in the left side. Then the B is the bottom path. That's a diffuse ambient amp with two ginormous effects after the fact. So I want that all the way in the right. And now I'm going to kind of turn on, and now we're just going to hear, I'm just going to strum a chord, and we'll kind of hear. When I put the guitar on, you can also hear some of the hiss. That's some of the noise coming through our driven kind of crunchy amp on the top. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn on the input gate, and you're going to hear that some of that fizz goes away, but I'm going to pull it down, so it's not everything. Okay, somewhere in there. Okay, so going back, so this is kind of what we have to work with now. Not a bad tone. Already we're kind of in a good spot, but I want to just demonstrate what you're hearing here. So I'm going to turn off. No, I'm going to leave the top one on. I'm going to turn off everything in the bottom chain. So everything in the bottom that was our wet signal is all off, and now you can hear it's very, very sterile. There is one thing that you're hearing in the right, and that is the absolutely unaffected guitar signal. So the direct signal just from the guitar is still going through this path. It's just not being affected by the amp, the delay, or the reverb. Now you'll hear a bigger difference when we test the wet signal. So I'm going to turn on all of these the wet line down here, and I'm going to turn off the dry. Now this is the one where you're going to really hear the left and right for this example. And if you've got headphones on, or if you're listening to this through speakers, you're hearing that big spacious reverb. And when I cut off the note, you can hear that note continues on. That note continues on in the right side. And the attack you're hearing in the left is, again, the dry signal. But when you put them both together, I turn the crunchy amp back on. Yeah, but really taken all together, you can hear that both of the amps are staying out of each other's way. You retain all of that crunch and all of that drive from the dry amp, where nothing is taking that away. And then in the wet path, you can add in buckets and buckets of delays and reverbs, and it does not lose any of its crispness or its attack. So with that, I hope you can see that there is a quick way, although it's stripped down, we're using all of the processing power that this unit has to give ourselves a true 2-amplifier wet-dry rig with still lots of variables that you can go back and tweak to your heart's content. Okay, I'm going to get everything switched up back again, and we'll close out this video. Well, there you have it. That's a way that we can take a true 2-amplifier, 2-signal path wet-dry rig and accomplish it in what is essentially the simplest of the modular units in the Line 6 family. Now, make sure you tune into our next episode, because as you saw, we did run into some limitations today. When we take the approach of putting 2 amplifiers in, you notice that we ran into some issues with processing power. And because the unit isn't designed to be the one-stop end-all be-all, we're gonna have that issue. But in our next episode, I'm going to show you a technique that will allow us more flexibility on the effects end by kind of cheating a little bit in what we do with the amps to free up some processing power. So make sure you check that out. And thanks for watching today. And as always, until next time, play on, my friends. Play on.